So our next project, this is one of our legacy projects at Case for Quality, and that is our analytics project. We haven't heard from the analytics project in a while, in part because, or exclusively because they were submitting a test case to NEST. If you're familiar with NEST, it's an NDOC initiative to do really cool things with real world evidence. And I'm excited to say that we were picked up as one of the test cases announced in May. So Garth is going to walk us through what exactly we're up to. We've got some members of the NEST team in the back here. This is the advantage of having the meeting here at NDIC offices. So really excited to share that. I will swap out your slides. So, oh wait, you have a microphone already. All right, good.
So I'll start off.
Hello?
There you go.
So I'll start off as the slides are coming up. Legacy project is probably a good way to call this. I was thinking as I was pulling the slides together, it now has the third title on it for the working group. It's 4.5 years old. I've been involved with it since the beginning, and the company name that I've worked for has changed as much as the working group name. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know.
And you sent the slides to me in the old NDIC format.
Yeah, I did.
But we're excited.
Yeah, so, yeah, I've got it. Yeah. So before I get into what we're doing now, because frankly, there really hasn't been a working group for about the last 6 or 7 months. We've been in this holding mode of things. Want to step back just a little bit for people that haven't seen this before, didn't know where the history was and how we arrived at what we did. But about 4.5 years ago, the group got together and we started talking about what does quality mean. And as industry, it's easy. We all have definitions internally. We have metrics. We think a lot of times compliance versus quality. But anyways, we have our definition of that. Well, the interesting thing is we took a different approach and we said, okay, a lot of times our devices aren't or don't go directly out to a patient. They actually go to sort of an intermediary as part of the process, whether it be a surgeon or whatever else. But we also said before any technology gets to the end in terms of use, the first hurdle it typically goes through is a value analysis committee within a hospital. So our approach was, let's look at them as the end customer and what quality means to them. So the project team started working and we got together with a few of the hospitals. Now this isn't working again. There we go. Whoops. There we go. So we got together with some hospital systems. We actually went out and got some members from, there's a American Healthcare Value Professional Society. I know I said it wrong. It's AVAP is what the acronym is. But we talked with AVAP. We talked with some group purchasing organizations. And we started talking to them about how they perceive quality of devices that they're bringing in. And what were the characteristics of that? And the team spent about 9-10 months or so, at least, developing what that meant. We interviewed, I don't know how many people as we were going through the process, a lot of great group sessions along those lines. But the thing that was important is traditionally what we think of as quality professionals, when you went out and started talking to the customer, that notion of quality extended to more things than what you would originally think about. So where we ended up was the 7 domains of quality. These are the things that we get measured on or evaluated on, in particular by the value analysis committees. We did some work at extending it beyond that on whether these sort of measures hit homes with other customers or customer groups that were there. We finally arrived that if you were able to truly present your devices, your outcomes, your therapies that you were providing, and give information related to these 7 things, that would be viewed as a high quality product that went into those customers' facilities or was used by the patient. That took a lot of time to pull together, a lot of input from folks. The next thing is great. We now have 7 domains of quality. We know what they are. How do we measure them? So we started going around and looking at what data was available out there, and I think everyone runs into the same problem. Manufacturers have data internally, hospital systems have data that they have, regulators have data as well. Nobody shares the data with each other, so it's difficult to assemble all of this in one place. So the other interesting thing that we found out as we were working with the value analysis committees is that they really don't want manufacturers to give them all this data because they don't necessarily believe the manufacturer, especially depending on who's presenting to the value analysis committee. They talked about if you have a clinical professional or a regulatory professional or a quality professional come in, they would believe it more, but typically it's a sales team or a marketing team that's coming in and talking with the value analysis committee. So the approach that we took is how do you go out and gather this data in a format that's not necessarily coming from manufacturers, that could be usable by the value analysis committees in the hospitals to actually make better decisions about the products that they were bringing in. At the time, we were working with Deloitte as well, and we took it to another step, which is if you gather a bunch of data, you have to be able to present it in a way that it can be consumed and used along those lines. So where we ended up was we created some makeshift dashboards. We actually went out and collected some manufacturer data. That was the easiest thing for us to pull in. Populated some of the information. We actually went out and ran some test cases with the value analysis committees, understanding that if you were able to go in with sort of a consumer reports approach, would that be something that they would see value in? And the answer is yes. So we knew we were headed in the right direction as a group. I'll call that phase one. Phase two of the analytics team is we started going out and looking at how could you capture all of this data? Who are the partners that are out there? So we worked with a lot of the major companies that are into analytics, that are into big data management, that type of thing, understanding what's available, understanding what hospital systems could provide as part of that. And again, we sort of hit a roadblock on a number of these things. What we started to focus in on, I'll go back to one of the measures. So one of the measures that's on here, we were able to get some safety data. There's sources that are out there associated with that. Effectiveness, there's places you can pull that in. Patient satisfaction, there's nothing great that's out there in terms of data source. Availability, companies have that information. Procurement organizations within the hospital or GPOs have that. Compatibility, usability, we found some ways of getting around that. The one that we had the trouble with was reliability. And how within a hospital system, if it wasn't coming from the manufacturer, how could they look at reliability? Where could that information come from? What source? So when the NEST real world test cases came about, we thought we knew everything as a team. We created a great proposal, we submitted it, and the first one was rejected. So we were out of the first round. We learned a lot from that. We actually went back and spoke with quite a few folks that are out there. And we developed a second test case. We worked with what would be potentially some data collaborators to understand what that would mean and whether there was a benefit to them in going down the process. So based on all of that, we did submit a test case. Instead of us choosing what the medical device was, we allowed the data collaborator, since they're trying to gain something out of this test case as well, we worked with them to figure out what's most important from them, if they could gain reliability information out of their data sets or their information that they have. So we scoped this around cardiac lead failures. And our approach to this was that we wanted to use data from the hospital systems. That's what was important. We didn't want to come in from the manufacturers. We know every manufacturer of cardiac leads has reliability programs in place, has massive databases in terms of what they're tracking and everything else. But the idea was not to use that to look at whether there was a better source or at least an equal source of data that was out there. So we got paired up with the STAR Clinical Research Network, in particular Wake Forest and Vanderbilt. We worked with them through development of a protocol or a study proposal associated with that. And basically what this effort is going to do is it's going to compare reliability information across 3 sources. It's going to look traditionally, hopefully with our partners in manufacturing, we're going to have some manufacturers that are willing to at least validate the data that's coming out. The main source is going to be that we're linking electronic patient records back to the CMS data and actually tracking reliability of devices based on time of implantation versus time of removal. This is something that Wake Forest and Vanderbilt have done on other programs, so they already have established a methodology of sort of pulling some of this information. The third data source is, since it's out there and it has information related to failures, we're going to do some cleansing on the MOD database, and we're going to do a comparison across to see which of the 3 sources align with each other, which one provides the most valuable data that's there, and really, do we have more than one source of reliability associated with devices? If proven, the advantage of something along these lines is if reliability is something that's important to the hospital systems, this provides a framework for now how they could look at other devices that manufacturers make and apply this same sort of methodology to understanding performance of devices. So they wouldn't have to rely on manufacturers providing information that they don't necessarily trust when we give it to them. Although we'll work on the trust issues as well, trust me. So where we stand today, so it was about a week and a half ago now, I guess, that we finally found out that our proposal had been accepted. Yay. Thank you. I said thank you. There's 40 people that are ghosts behind me that were involved in this whole process. But so we're reinitiating the team again. I just had some discussions with the heads of the START Clinical Research Network last week. They're going through some of the final items related to contracts and their IRB process and all of that. It was interesting as we were going through this process that there's another real-world test case that's out there, which is called EP Passion. EP Passion is looking at a very similar thing, cardiac leads and failures, but its approach is a little bit different. Its approach is it's actually mining the CMS database, and it's going, or the intent was to compare CMS database to what the manufacturers have, without any linkage into what the actual hospital systems have from a tracking perspective. So right now we're trying to establish a cross collaboration with them, such that both studies can actually gain some benefit out of the information that's there, and we might not have to necessarily repeat some of the work that has previously been done. But there's some further discussions that are occurring next week related to those manufacturers participating. This is all the major manufacturers of cardiac leads are part of EP Passion, so we're trying to have them part of this study as well. But we anticipate that realistically, probably the August-September timeframe is when the project will officially start. So we have some time in between now and then where, from an industry perspective, we're beginning to draw in what are our partners, who are the people that want to participate from an industry perspective. START Clinical Research Network has also reached out, and it appears now that University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill wants to participate as well. So we actually may have 3 hospital systems involved in the study. So that's the gist of it. We believe it's about a 12-month effort in terms of going through this, and then hopefully the end result is that we get some great data that we can compare back and forth and look at sort of the quality of the information that comes from the 3 different sources.
Guy, thank you for an excellent summary. I just had one question. Are you able to identify these at the case level so you can see what shows up in each database?
Yeah, so this is the interesting thing that, so the approach that we're taking out of the electronic patient records, the first thing related to cardiac leads, there's some procedural codes as well as billing codes that are applied. So you're able to narrow down on which case records are the ones that you want to look at based on the billing procedures that they've been through. Wake Forest and Vanderbilt have part of their process some context analytics that they can run. So yes, they have the ability to get into the text that's part of their electronic records as well. We don't believe that you're going to find codes in their system, for example, that say failure. Really what we're looking at is the intent of the electronic record is to identify first implantation based on the codes, link to CMS, and then back down into subsequent procedures that have occurred in the same hospital systems. If they haven't occurred within the same hospital systems, then utilize the CMS data to understand what the sort of horizontal life has been associated with that particular patient. So yes, we are down at the patient procedure level, the actual application of the medical technology to that. Yeah.
Hi, I was just curious if you're actually using specific UDI information, so you know exactly like what manufacturing lot the device came from and connecting that next.
Yeah, so fantastic question. Vanderbilt and Wake Forest do put UDI information into their electronic records. There is it's like everyone that implements, they only goes back so far. They believe that they have 3 full years of data of patient records that currently have UDI that's in it. That will be something else that's validated as part of our process. We're also anticipating that there may be some need we may just get a serial number and have to do some searches associated with that. But the intent with that is, so we are going to go through some data validation, or that's the intent with the manufacturers, is that after that information is extracted, so they have their patient population from the hospital system, we're going to ask manufacturers, can you trace that back into your system and understand if this is what you have as records that are there? So that's part of that validation piece, and that's why it's critical also that we have the medical device manufacturers participate as part of this. Yeah.
It's not a question, just an observation. It's interesting to see that out of your 7 domains of quality, availability is one of them.
Yeah. Availability came down because if you present a technology to a hospital and they can't treat their patient, it impacts the quality and the outcome associated with it. So it was that piece of thing. If you go on back order, you're hurting patients, especially if they don't have an alternate technology in the hospital system. Yeah.
All right, well, this is really exciting, Garth. We look forward to hearing results of future meetings, or hearing progress of future meetings. Really exciting. All right, thanks, guys.